The faint hum of the aircraft's engines resonated through the cabin as passengers settled into their seats for the cross-country flight from Los Angeles to Miami. Among the travelers was Vanessa Grant, a veteran flight attendant with over 20 years of experience. Known for her sharp professionalism and no-nonsense demeanor, Vanessa prided herself on running an efficient cabin. For her, efficiency meant strict adherence to rules and minimal room for niceties. The first-class cabin sparkled with luxury, polished wooden tray tables, plush reclining seats, and the soft glow of overhead lights reflecting off champagne flutes. Vanessa's sharp gaze swept through the aisle, scanning for any detail out of place. Her blonde hair was pinned immaculately, a reflection of her personality, disciplined and meticulous. Her attention was caught by the passenger in seat 2A. The woman, perhaps in her early 40s, didn't fit the flashy mold of typical first-class travelers. Dressed simply in a soft cashmere sweater, tailored black pants, and pearl earrings, her understated elegance made her stand out in its own quiet way. As Vanessa passed by, she noticed the woman pull out a small, worn leather journal from her tote bag. The woman began jotting down notes with deliberate care, her movements calm and unhurried. Something about the woman's composed presence unsettled Vanessa. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence that radiated from her. A stark contrast to the usual entitled first-class passengers Vanessa was accustomed to handling. Pushing aside her unease, Vanessa approached with her usual air of authority. "Ma'am, I'll need you to stow your bag in the overhead bin before takeoff," Vanessa said, her tone clipped but polite. The woman looked up, her calm brown eyes meeting Vanessa's. "Thank you, but I prefer to keep it under my seat," she replied evenly, her voice gentle yet firm. Vanessa's lips tightened. Rules were rules, and she wasn't about to make an exception, not even in first class. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but airline policy requires all personal items to be stowed overhead during takeoff. It's for your safety," Vanessa insisted, her practiced smile faltering slightly. The woman's gaze didn't waver. "I understand, but it's not in anyone's way, and it contains something important to me. I'd prefer not to stow it," she replied with quiet assurance. A ripple of tension spread through the cabin as nearby passengers began to glance up, sensing the standoff. Vanessa felt her authority slipping, and she hated the feeling. Leaning in slightly, she lowered her voice, though her tone remained firm. "If everyone started making exceptions, ma'am, it would lead to chaos. I'm asking politely, please place your bag in the overhead bin." The woman sighed softly, closing her journal and slipping it into her tote bag. With visible reluctance, she handed the bag to Vanessa, who briskly secured it in the overhead compartment. "Thank you," Vanessa said curtly. The woman responded with a faint smile, more dismissive than appreciative. Vanessa's chest tightened. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but something about this woman's calm defiance struck a nerve. As the plane taxied and ascended into the skies, Vanessa busied herself serving drinks and snacks. Yet her attention kept drifting back to the woman in seat 2A. The passenger didn't complain or demand special treatment. She simply sat there, composed and seemingly unbothered, alternating between gazing out the window and writing in her journal. Her presence was quietly commanding, and that bothered Vanessa more than she cared to admit. A few hours into the flight, the seatbelt sign blinked off, and Vanessa returned to the first-class cabin for a routine check. To her irritation, she noticed the woman's tote bag back under her seat. Approaching with a forced smile, Vanessa leaned down. "Ma'am, I need to remind you that your bag cannot stay there," she said firmly. The woman set down her glass of water and met Vanessa's gaze. "I retrieved it after takeoff. There's no turbulence, and it's not obstructing anyone." "I hope that's not a problem," she said, her tone calm but resolute. Vanessa felt a flare of irritation. "It is a problem if it disregards policy," she shot back. The woman's brow lifted slightly. "Policy or power?" she asked, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. The question struck Vanessa harder than she expected. A few passengers glanced up, their curiosity piqued by the brewing confrontation. Vanessa's cheeks flushed as she tightened her grip on the serving tray. "I'm doing my job," Vanessa retorted sharply, "and I expect passengers to follow instructions for the safety and comfort of everyone on board. And I expect respect," the woman replied, her tone cool but edged with steel. Even when I don't fit someone's idea of a typical first-class passenger. The word stung. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, another passenger, a middle-aged man in seat 2C, cleared his throat loudly. Is everything okay here? He asked, his gaze flicking between Vanessa and the woman. Vanessa quickly straightened, forcing a smile. Yes, everything's fine. Just clarifying some safety procedures. The woman gave the man a polite nod, but said nothing more. Vanessa could feel the scrutiny of the entire cabin, her authority hanging by a thread. She moved on, but her frustration simmered beneath the surface. For the rest of the flight, the tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in seat 2A wasn't just challenging her authority. She was holding up a mirror, forcing Vanessa to confront something deeper. As the hours passed, Vanessa's irritation festered, setting the stage for a final confrontation that would change everything. The hours wore on, and the plane cruised steadily toward Miami. Vanessa moved mechanically through her duties, her mind swirling with frustration. The woman in seat 2A had been calm and composed, yet something about her quiet confidence had unsettled Vanessa in a way she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't just the defiance. It was the way the woman seemed utterly unbothered by Vanessa's authority. The final hour of the flight loomed, and Vanessa decided to make one last pass through the cabin. She needed to reassert control, to reestablish herself as the one in charge. Approaching seat 2A, she spotted the tote bag once again resting under the woman's seat, as though her earlier instructions had never mattered. Vanessa squared her shoulders and approached with renewed determination. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "we're preparing for landing. Your bag needs to be stowed." The woman looked up slowly, her expression calm but with a hint of weariness. "I will put it away in just a moment," she replied, her tone unchanging. Vanessa's patience finally snapped. "No, you'll do it now," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I've asked you several times, and it seems you think the rules don't apply to you. But they do. This isn't negotiable." The woman placed the bag on the floor and leaned back in her seat, her calm demeanor only infuriating Vanessa further. Then, with an almost imperceptible shake of her head, the woman spoke quietly. "What is it with you?" Vanessa blurted, lowering her voice but unable to hide her irritation. "Do you think being in first class makes you better than everyone else? Do you think you're special?" The woman's eyes darkened slightly, her voice steady but sharp. "And do you think wearing a uniform gives you the right to speak to people however you please?" Nearby passengers stopped pretending not to listen. Their eyes darted between the two women, tension thick in the air. Vanessa felt her composure slipping further. She leaned closer, her tone harsh. "Ma'am, I don't know what your problem is, but I need you to follow instructions. If you can't, perhaps you should consider another mode of travel." The woman gave a small, almost imperceptible laugh. Shaking her head, she replied, "It's always interesting how people show you who they are when they think you're beneath them." The words hit Vanessa like a slap. Her chest tightened as she fought to maintain control, but her professional mask was crumbling. Before she could stop herself, she leaned in closer, her voice trembling with anger. "Listen, I've had enough of your attitude. If you can't follow simple rules, maybe you shouldn't be flying at all." The woman remained composed, but her eyes burned with intensity. Then, with deliberate slowness, she stood up, commanding the attention of everyone in the cabin. Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. "I think you've forgotten who you're talking to." Vanessa blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Excuse me?" The woman reached into her tote bag and pulled out a sleek leather portfolio. She opened it, revealing an identification card and a set of documents bearing an embossed logo that made Vanessa's heart sink. It was the emblem of Beer, the very airline they were flying on. "My name is Simone Bell," the woman said, her voice steady and controlled. "I'm the majority shareholder and CEO of Beer, which, as you might realize, owns this plane and employs you." Gasps rippled through the cabin as the other passengers took in her words. Vanessa felt her knees go weak as she stared at the credentials, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. "You're the CEO?" Vanessa stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. That's correct, Simone replied, slipping the portfolio back into her bag. And while I don't usually advertise my presence, I also don't tolerate disrespect or unprofessional behavior from my employees. The weight of Simone's words hung heavy in the air. Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. She had just spent the entire flight arguing with, and ultimately insulting, the woman who held the power to end her career with a single phone call. I didn't know, Vanessa stammered, her voice shaking. Simone raised a hand, silencing her. That's the problem, she said, her tone sharp but calm. You assumed, based on how I look or how I act, that I wasn't important. You let your frustration and your bias guide your behavior, and now you're standing here exposed for who you truly are. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The cabin was silent, every passenger hanging on Simone's words. As the plane touched down in Miami and taxied to the gate, Simone turned to the other passengers. I apologize for the disturbance, she said, her voice returning to its calm, measured tone. Please enjoy the rest of your flight. With that, Simone picked up her bag and walked toward the exit, her posture steady and composed. Her presence seemed to fill the entire cabin, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed the exchange. Vanessa stood frozen in place, replaying the incident over and over in her mind. The enormity of her mistake pressed down on her like a weight she couldn't shake. She wanted to call after Simone, to apologize, to plead for forgiveness, but her voice refused to cooperate. As the last of the passengers disembarked, Vanessa realized the true consequences of her actions were only just beginning. She had lost more than her temper. She had lost her professionalism, her dignity, and perhaps her career. The lesson Simone Bell had imparted would stay with her forever, a stark reminder of the power of humility and the danger of assumptions.